All right.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Let's Talk Assassin's Creed, your number one podcast for all things Assassin's Creed. Today's episode, we're looking at our personal favourite DLCs from the series. But we're not alone. I am joined by the host of the Memory Corridor podcast on YouTube, Gustav, which is an awesome dude.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, you had me first, so I've got to stalk you and bring you back.
It's my pleasure returning. Yeah. All right. So I'm ready to discuss something. So let's just go.
You're as eager as me. So, DLCs in general in games, DLCs are mixed responses. Some people like them, some don't. But I think Assassin's Creed has some of the best DLCs. And the first one I want to mention would be Assassin's Creed 3 with George Washington.
Tyranny of King Washington. Yeah.
That DLC has to be one of the coolest I've ever played in gaming history.
Yeah, I'll agree. I actually only played it this year with Assassin's Creed 3 Remastered, but there were some pretty cool ideas. Like I was really into the whole alternate reality thing, and Connor gaining like animal powers and stuff. That was a pretty cool concept. The whole sci-fi twist, since it's an alternate reality, like nothing is really canon and everything is possible.
And what I did a lot of research. Some of the abilities Connor got was akin to his old beliefs in his old tribe,
like
so it kept it
Native American culture.
So it kept it historically grounded through Connor's background, but still had that freedom to show what if something went wrong with a piece of Eden and our timeline was different.
Absolutely, it was pretty cool. And then like the whole thing was George Washington saw this, and then he knew there was never going to be like a sole king of the United States. Like some people today in the United States don't really understand that, but sure, whatever. Those in power today.
I think one thing that stood out to me the most is it was a three-parter. It wasn't just you got the whole DLC, you got three parts, part 1, 2, and 3, which explored it in great detail. And
yeah, it was pretty cool. Like we had, what was it, like first one took place on the frontier, then it was Boston, and then it was on to New York, with George Washington's pyramid built in like the middle of the city.
That would have been creepy to see in real life, just a giant pyramid.
Yeah, in Washington or something. But yeah, as you said, like I liked the story and everything. It was just other than that, the DLC was pretty thin. Like there wasn't really much to do other than mess around with your bear powers and like explore the map, which you had already explored in the main game. Like there wasn't really any like remarkable side missions or anything.
See, I get that, but when you're walking through Boston and you realize you can stab people as an assassin or attack them as a weird bear, I kind of think attacking them as a weird bear is a bit more entertaining.
Oh, sure.
Just some ghostly bear beating everybody up.
Sure. But yeah, overall, Tyranny of King Washington introduced cool things. And yeah, I would definitely like to I talked about that on my own podcast a few years ago now, like the whole like alternate reality, like kind of sci-fi element, and like I really hope they bring that back somehow in like future installments.
It'd be kind of cool if they did, but it will be kind of hard to see how they could balance it in a sense.
Yeah, perhaps. Perhaps.
Perhaps. We never know with Assassin's Creed. That's the whole... you never know where it's going.
Yeah.
So I think the next era we could look at is... I know it's a mixed one for some people, but I really think the Dead Kings DLC from Unity was actually really good.
It was, story-wise, it was short, but I liked the things introduced, and it was at the head of Saint Denis, like that magical, creepy thing, and the whole map, like it was the town of Franciade, I think it was. It had a very certain like medieval, post-medieval, gloomy, dark vibe to it, and I actually really like that. Like the abandoned churches and like the underground tunnels, and it was pretty cool.
I liked as well that how it flowed really nicely from the main game, which
Well,
some
sure,
DLCs
sure.
don't,
Like it was
but
literally
some
just
do.
in the main game, travel to France shot, and really smoothly.
And I think it gives that illusion that it wasn't just a DLC, but an epilogue to the campaign.
Yeah,
And
it took
I think
place like I think late 1790s, like after Arno had been like to like Egypt or something. I think like, and he had been like drinking a bit to uh, um, kind of cure himself over Elise's death and whatnot. From what I know, like he had a few down years after the ending of Unity. And then this one, Dead Kings, is supposed to, yeah, I think take place in like late 1790s or something.
which is kind of good because I know there was that whole controversy with the bugs,
Oh
and
yeah,
it was then released as a free
oh
DLC.
yeah,
But
that's it. Yeah, yeah, they released it free as like excuse for horrible launch.
but I think being a free DLC, I know it's meant to be paid, but being a free DLC that everyone can access, I think that's what kind of sells it a
It
bit
was pretty
more.
good.
Because to
Yeah,
me, you play it, you finish the campaign, and then you
it's
got this
pretty cool.
free epilogue of
It was pretty
sorts
cool.
to see where to go
Yeah.
next.
Not to take the helm or anything, but I actually just before we move on from Unity, I quickly wanted to maybe talk about the ones during the Ezio era, if you remember those. There was the Da
I'm,
Vinci disappearance for Brotherhood. Do you remember that one?
I'm gonna sound like a proper non-true fan, and I apologize, but when Ezio originally came out, I didn't have access to internet or to knowledge, and it wasn't until 2 years ago I knew that Ezio games had DLC.
Oh, I didn't play it until last year with the Ezio collection, so no
I'm
hard
still
feelings.
waiting to try and get the Ezio
And
collection.
then for Assassin's Creed
It,
2, there was the Battle of Forli and the Bonfire of the Vanities, like two additional sequences that take place between like when Ezio officially becomes assassin and the his mission to Rome at the end of AC2. Um, Perhaps you've seen the clip with like this really epic speech in he holds in Florence.
I have seen that.
Yeah,
It's one of
that's
the
from
most
Bonfire of the
inspirational
Vanities.
quotes.
Set
Oh,
in like
I'm now
I
going to
think
play it.
1498. And also like a whole nother map of Florence is unlocked, which is pretty cool. Like some pretty iconic landmarks and stuff, like the old opera house, for example, which is on like the I think it's Poltrano Island. I can't remember, something like that. But yeah, you should check those out. And the Da Vinci Disappearance like kind of focuses on Roman mythology a little bit, which is pretty cool. And um, yeah, it's like I think 10 additional missions. It's pretty fun. You should definitely play that when you get the chance.
I will do. So since you've tried them, you could tell us a bit about some of the things that stuck out and highlighted them.
Yeah, I think it's overall, that's what made the Ezio games fun. Those free run missions, like in temples and stuff, that kind of returns a little bit. And familiar faces return. Do you remember Lucrezia Borgia?
Yeah.
There's also a mission with her, Ezio using his charm to like, kind of fool her, get some information out of her. Nothing explicit, don't worry. Almost. Just Ezio being the beautiful man he is. And then something with like stolen Da Vinci paintings and yeah, it's nothing like too much, and it's kind of set between what is it, 1503, sequence 8 of Brotherhood, and the end. Where Ezio tracks down Cesare Borgia, because there was in those years he did return to Rome once, and that is like this is what he was up to.
Seems like something I should
Yeah,
definitely check out when it's on sale
yeah.
because
But
I really
in
enjoyed
in
the
the
Ezio
the Ezio
collection.
collection, the for the current gen consoles, all DLC is like already comes with that automatically. Um,
Hmm.
Also for AC2 and Revelations. There is also a Revelations one that I still haven't played. It's kind of like this, kind of I think first persony art. arcade stuff, or not arcade. I don't know what to call it. It's kind of like something that focuses on Subject 16, I think it is.
I might have to look into
Yeah,
that. That sounds pretty
I
cool.
haven't played that yet, but yeah, the two additional sequences for AC2 and yeah, the Da Vinci disappearance. Those are pretty solid.
I'll have to look into
Yeah,
that.
definitely.
Um, and
You should definitely do it.
another D- another DLC I was going to look at, but I've been very iffy on it because it was released as a standalone. Freedom Cry.
Oh, Freedom Cry. Yeah, I played that about 2 years ago, and I'm gonna say it like this: a lot of people say it's really great, but I don't see what all the fuss is about. Like, yeah, sure, it was cool to play as Adewale for a little bit, and find the wreckage of the Jackdaw. His old ship, Edward's old ship. But other than that, like, it was just kind of thin in a way. Um, in a way, like, sure, there were some
I
fun story missions. There were like 9 additional memories, like an entire sequence, and then there were some cool sites to explore. Of course, a few more sites, and yeah, it focuses a bit on like the brutality of slavery, which I guess is cool as well, or not cool, but it's an important subject. But other than that, like, I wasn't too impressed with Freedom Cry, which is weird considering like Black Flag, the main game. I absolutely adore that, and always will.
I think for me, I really enjoyed Freedom Cry for the aspect of instead of giving us a DLC where we copy and follow more Edward, we got to see Adawai
Yeah, and
rise, which I really loved.
it was set like over 10 years after the end of Black Flag. Like, I think Edward might be dead by the time it takes place, actually, or he's very close to being killed in like 1735, I believe it was. Yeah, he
So
didn't become very
trying
old, Edward, unfortunately.
so trying to drag Edward into a DLC wouldn't have worked, but to see someone that was a strong supporting character, as I always call him, to then get some big limelight and a good little story, I thought it was kind of unique. Sometimes they don't take supporting characters and give them a DLC, but this time they did, and it worked really
Absolutely.
well in my eyes.
Yeah, it was cool, but yeah, it was an okay DLC, and the blunderbuss, the big gun, was pretty fun as well.
I think the next one because we're gonna save our favourites because I know what our favourites are to the end. So I think the next one we could look at that I love the concept and I love the gameplay, but other than that, I wasn't so keen. And that's the Jack the Ripper
That's
DLC
weird
from
because that is
Syndicate.
my favorite. Jack the Ripper is my favorite.
Is it?
It's absolute. I look. I remember when I started that up. The intro mission. It's dark. It's creepy as hell. You're playing as Jack the Ripper chasing Jacob, and that scene, like, they're fighting in Jacob's apartment, and like, Jack on top of Jacob saying like, "I am the solution," and then it just cuts to black. Like, that was pretty damn. I'm a pretty big fan of like thrillers like that as well. So that was like perfectly crafted suspense. I just in general, like, I loved the like the whole darker tone of it, and the fact that it was only like 1/3 of the entire London map, that you could like be at. But also throughout the game, some of the other locations you go to, like this old insane asylum and this abandoned hospital, like at an island, like south of London or something. Like, I just love the like dark tone and like the gloominess, and the whole thriller vibe of it. I love that DLC, Jack the Ripper.
I played a bit of it and I
Absolutely
loved it.
loved it.
I do like the story and its concept. I don't know. I think I played too much Syndicate, so I think I may have just been burnt out by the time I got around to playing it. But
That's cool. I mean,
I
it was only released like about 2 months after the release of the initial game. I don't know. I thought it was pretty cool, like, end of the year mini game to get Jack the Ripper.
I think to go down that route was actually the most amazing idea for Syndicate because of the time frame. There's a lot they could have done, but to go around the Jack the Ripper idea, I think was fantastic.
Absolutely,
I
because it was
love it.
And it was pretty cool also to return to like a character like that long time after the main game, because usually it's like only a bit like during the main game or like a year after the main game if it's the same character. But here this was set like 20 years after the main game. um so Evie and Jacob, they're like in their early 40s, still agile as hell for whatever reason. um but yeah, it was just pretty cool, and like seeing Evie's like she married Henry and went to India, so it was cool to like kind of see her like Indian fighting techniques and like um, bomb craftsmanship and stuff. So or craftship, man, I don't know, whatever. It was pretty cool to see. I really like that DLC. I think yeah, that would be my favorite AC1 AC DLC.
Well, I think the last DLC to talk about that I would say is the best DLC in my eyes has to be Curse of the
Curse of the
Pharaohs.
Pharaohs. I'm actually having that on pause right now as we're recording. Just exploring the afterlives a little bit. So I'll say it like this: Curse of the Pharaohs is I liked, and that's just in general. I I have said to you before that I wasn't the biggest fan of Origins' structure story wise. The quest, it just kind of became too loose, and you could really like track it, untrack it whenever you want it, and I wasn't a big fan of that. So I couldn't help but fall off a little bit story wise, but it was still pretty cool. I like the idea, and you know I really like this whole like, even though everything was an illusion, the whole afterlives, that how I understood it, it was all an illusion. But let's for the sake just say it wasn't completely. I do like this idea of like interdimensionality being introduced in the games. The fact that like the afterlives are like an alternate dimension, I guess is the best scientific way to explain it, if it was.
I think I think for me, I'm a really big fan of mythology, and to see them not only create mini maps inside such a huge map, which isn't just a technical achievement. I think
Yeah,
games that can make mini maps with a very small load screen. Uh, I'm on PS4 Slim, so it's not really super duper hardware, but the load times for the afterlives are really smooth. They didn't take as long as fast traveling, which was unique, but so much detail and care went into crafting each afterlife.
absolutely. Like
That was
there's four different ones. There was the desert one with all the statues. That was the Hepset, and that was Ramses afterlife. Then there was Queen Nefertiti, and which was like these open wheat fields. Then there was this one, if you remember, with like this sun in the middle of it, and then there's the Duat, of course, which is beyond beautiful, which was Tutankhamun's.
And I think that's the whole. When you look at the mythology, they've took that into heart, and that's what I love. Like the Duat is represented as best as possible in texture in game. The um the one you talk about with the field of reeds, that one's described as best it can from texture, and the Ramsey one just really highlights his war and
Yeah,
everything that went on through
there's
his
this
era.
huge, like, if you remember, this huge area which is just like dead corpses and everything, which is like all the corpses of one of the battles he went into.
And I think that just when you went into them, they never felt the same.
No,
And I
no,
think that's the whole.
absolutely, and but yeah, that's also this interdimensional thing, I guess. That there are these four mini maps like coexisting with the real world map, and everything. Yeah, I just thought it was pretty cool. Also because considering I am a pretty big sci-fi, time travel, like different dimensions fan of those concepts. So yeah, I couldn't help but think it was pretty cool.
I think the only thing I really hated was when it first came out. I was so eager to jump in, and I do remember getting demolished by the undead pharaohs.
But yeah, those some of those boss battles were a little bit annoying because you had to defeat like each pharaoh as a boss in their afterlife. That could get a bit hectic. But other than that, it was a pretty cool DLC. If anything, just for like the photogenicness of like the different worlds, the different afterlives, and yeah, the concept was pretty cool too, and the story was okay. But I think it's mainly just like the idea of it that took it home for me.
And for me, I think it's just the whole mythology and
Yeah,
story that I've followed
sure.
because
I mean, I'm
to
not too
this
big
day,
into Egyptian mythology actually, but you're right. I mean, if anything, I kind of like the more Roman mythology that we saw a little bit in the Da Vinci disappearance. You know, the with you know the four elements: earth, fire, wind, and water. That kind of stuff.
I'm definitely going to have to check that out because
Sure,
Roman mythology is really good mythology.
sure.
It's I think some of it is from Greek mythology. I think they just stole some of the
Yeah,
gods.
probably. Um, I'm not sure, but pretty great nonetheless.
So before we wrap up, is there any DLCs that you found that you thought were just amazing
Assassin's
that we
Creed.
haven't
Let me
talked about?
think. We've had. Let's just go over them. There was Bonfire of the Vanities, Da Vinci Disappearance. Then there was Tyranny King Washington, Freedom Cry. We talked about that. Dead Kings, Jack the Ripper. We haven't covered it, but I guess we could cover the hidden ones real quick. You know, the first one for Origins. Not that I was a big fan of it, really, to be honest. But yeah, if anything, like it gave us like an extra map, like an extra mini map, like Sinai, which was pretty cool, and it was pretty cool to see like what's her name, Amunet again. Um, yeah, you know, a few years after the main game, and like her new outfit and stuff. That was pretty cool. If anything,
I think for me with the hidden ones, I tend to stay away from calling it DLC because I love it
what did you call
so
it? Continent DLC?
content DLC.
I just can hear you.
Yeah. I I tend to stay away from calling it like all the others because of how much I literally played from getting it to completing it to the DLC was a good 6 months straight, one after the other. Because it flowed so nicely, I see it in my head as more of a true epilogue to the game
Sure,
and not as a DLC.
sure.
And
I don't know. It was just story wise, it kind of bored me really. Like I, in the end, the moral of the story was why the assassin made up the rule to not take the lives of civilians, because apparently someone in the Brotherhood back then, like he achieved his goal, but it was at the cost of many civilian lives, from how I remember it. And yeah, it was just kind of poorly executed in a way.
I think for me, it kind of struck a chord because playing from number one since day one and drill them ahead that we don't kill civilians to then get this game that's like, actually, this is how the Brotherhood's created, to then play a DLC that I feel shouldn't be a DLC, should have just been a true epilogue. To seeing why some of the tenants were made kind of just blew my mind quite a bit. I love the map and the story. I just stay away from calling DLC because I
Yeah,
feel like it should never have been paid content. It should have just ended the
yeah,
game, maybe pre-credit scene,
yeah. I mean,
roll the credits and then
I remember I bought the season pass for Origins. I thought like it's not a lot of money. I might as well get it. Um, you know, but I never really. Yeah, there were some extra outfits in the main game, and then the two DLCs, which especially Curse of the Pharaohs made it worth it. But yeah, other than that, like I guess you could be right. Like the Origins DLCs, yeah, they were okay. Like had some cool ideas, if anything.
but that's what the name of the show was, to look over the DLCs and see which ones we found to be the best in our eyes and what we
Absolutely,
enjoy the most about them.
absolutely.
And
I actually just wondered, like, would you, for a future one, like, whenever that would possibly be, not that I think it's going to happen, but would you like to see the return? I may have asked you in the beginning, but that, like, alternate reality thing, like, really where it's more sci-fi ish, because, you know, they can do that since nothing is really taking place?
um mixed. I want I really enjoy that style, but I want it to be more akin to what they did in Odyssey, where they managed to incorporate with the Isu lore. It feels sci-fi as hell, but it works so well because it's a simulation.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
And
I haven't played those, so I'm not too sure like how much of it I get, but I have heard a little bit. Yeah, Atlantis and those ones.
to me, they're more the sort of style I want. Like, I really love the George Washington style, alternate reality,
Yeah,
but I loved the Fate of Atlantis because it was a simulation through Isu memories. This is the Isu lore, which we don't get much of. It wasn't executed that well, which is why it's not on this list, but it's a sort of style I could see them return to in the future. Maybe with Valhalla, where they use
absolutely.
Isu
Like
tech.
I've talked a little bit about that on some of my episodes, but it wouldn't surprise me if they do like for Valhalla one that like somehow makes Norse mythology a part of the first civilization, because everything that we call mythology was real in the Assassin's Creed universe and is somehow related to the Isu. So
Which,
I mean,
and
I,
I've
I
only
mean,
dropped this.
do you remember the? I just played that recently again. The Truth video from AC2. Those fragments you could find all throughout the world. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, that was Adam and Eve escaping Eve, or Eden, that's called. Um, and I read recently that they're possibly looking at Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa, which would then the biggest mountain in Africa. I just found out that myself recently, and that would somehow add to the fact that like life originated from Africa, which some theories suggest. I don't know. I think that's just a cool Easter egg, and I don't know. In general, I just love that whole not to go off track, but that whole glyph thing for me from like the Ezio games. It was really dark and but really cool. Uncovering all these old documents and which shows like everyone from Edison to Hitler to like Henry Ford and people like those were Templars. Like what?
well, one thing I've not shared with many people, but I'll happily show you on here as we're talking about DLCs. If we get DLCs for Valhalla, my theory is, but it could be main game, Ragnarok.
Yeah, yeah, we
Rag
yeah, yeah. I think we may have talked about that at some point, but you're right. Like somehow the theory of the prophecy of Ragnarok is related to the first Civ and stuff.
yes, essentially two ideas. Either the upcoming battle that was hinted in, well, it's not a battle, but Isu coming back, and we already have the Templars and
Yeah,
Assassins
yeah.
at war.
It
That
could
screams
be. It
Ragnarok.
could be. Yeah, yeah. But I mean, Norse mythology. Even though I'm Scandinavian myself, like I've never really read too much of it. Like, but I do know, like about the some of the different nine different worlds and like some of the different gods and stuff like that, and some of the prophecies. So
Oh,
yeah.
uh,
They could throw. They could probably make it work like a Norse mythology thing.
I mean, the biggest way they can make it work in my eyes is akin to what you said about Adam and Eve escaping. What if Ragnarok, with the War of the Gods, was the battle that led to the humans versus the Isu? Because with Adam and Eve being evolutions of not being able to be
Hold
controlled.
on. You're saying the Ragnarok prophecy led to the humans versus like that took place 75,000 years ago.
Yes, but translated through history, because stories through history are always
Oh
no one
yeah,
knows
yeah,
where they
yeah.
first originate
But
from.
actually, now that you say not to go into too much Chris Nolan universe talk here, but it wouldn't surprise me actually if because we have been introduced to what is it? I think it's the Nexus. I think it's called like that like
Yeah,
kind of altered like that. It's a separate dimension really. Where like the where time is eternal in a way. Like you can get a message through. You can enter it in like 2011, for example, but deliver a message to someone in 1511, which Ezio did. He went into it there and delivered a message to Desmond in the present day, like 500 years later. Um, yeah, I don't know. Maybe
which
it's
is
related somehow.
which is why, in my eyes, as I always thought about it, I've not talked about it much, but one of the Viking settlers found the Isu temple. They played a memory or something from the Nexus that talked about the Isu, who were one race, had a war against another race who were more evolved than the slaves, so they could look like a separate sense of gods. And because of all them fighting, they missed the Toga catastrophe, which ended the world.
Yeah,
Which, if a Viking who is a little bit illiterate, doesn't understand all these messages, would be a battle of the gods that destroyed the world.
yeah, and
Ragnarok.
correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I remember, Ragnarok was just the big battle of like the Asgard and like the Jotunheim realm or whatever it is.
The world
Yeah, yeah,
serpents and
serpent. Yeah,
Loki
yeah, those guys. I can't remember what they're called.
pretty much just ended the world. It's how Thor died and everything. But
Yeah,
if you if you imagine a Viking, not to sound rude, but a peasant essentially, not understanding these real implications of the ones who came before, seeing a memory of humans and Isu fighting through technology, through battle. We don't know what they used for warfare back then. We know how pieces of Eden act. But imagine a DLC that explored the Isu War that would soon become the tale of Ragnarok.
absolutely. Yeah, I'm open for the idea. Um, I'm open for the idea.
I'm open for any ideas that don't make me sound crazy.
So yeah, but not. Finally, I guess just not that I want to throw too much in there, but now that I just mentioned like the whole Nexus thing, I am a pretty big fan of like time travel-y stuff. Like I hope we somehow return to that, like the Nexus or in the future, and that perhaps like because that is like you see that in a lot of like time travel movies as well, that like something happened in the future, but that also happened in the past, and it had to happen in the past to happen in the future in the first place. So it's kind of this theory that time is really just like an endless loop, like everything takes place at the same time.
Well, if you're interested in that sort of stuff, have you looked up, which I know we can't really discuss much tonight, but look up the empirical truth in Origins.
The empiric.
That does
I
talk
actually just
empiric.
is that the one? I just unlocked that yesterday. Is that the one beneath the Sphinx? There's like this
Um,
huge first civilization temple, but I still need like some ancient artifacts to unlock the message. I think it's the final one of those like first civilization temples, ancient messages
I
recorded.
Yeah, I would advise listen to them all because they do talk about how
Yeah,
Desmond's
yeah,
actions in number three wasn't supposed to happen.
it's probably the one beneath the Sphinx. Then like this huge temple. It probably is that one.
Well, I think we may have deviated off the topic slightly.
Yeah, I'll have to go into the game and find some of those like golden pieces that you need to unlock the messages. Sounds interesting.
It
So
is.
yeah, but yeah, I don't know if we
I
have anything more to talk about.
I think we've covered everything.
That's cool.
So these are our, as I would say, these are our thoughts. And as always, please send me on our Discord or through email or through Twitter your favorite DLCs yourself because you may have liked something we didn't, or you may have more thoughts on the stuff we've talked about. Please check the description for links to Gustav's podcast, The Memory Corridor.
Yeah,
It's a really good
I
show
post
for
those on
YouTube.
in collaboration with an Assassin's Creed fan page called The Ones Who Came Before. Um, so yeah, you can go to that channel to check those out if you want to.
There's also links in a previous episode where you can find the ones who came before Twitter, where I worked with Cole on an episode. So you know about them guys. I never stop talking about them. So this is all we have time for tonight. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, absolutely.